This is what Republicans do. They change the laws when the laws do not fit them. A move under the direction, I guarantee you, of Donald Trump and his cronies, a move in the state of Georgia to limit the power of the district attorney who is currently investigating Donald Trump. I kid you not. Now remember, this investigation in Fulton County, Georgia, is a very limited investigation into what Donald Trump did in Georgia, which was meddling in an election. That is a no-no. It is a statutory dynamic. It is illegal. When she talked about, Fani Willis, when she talked about the scope of the investigation, here's what she said.
I don't plan on specifically coordinating with the Department of Justice. What their investigation would be is obviously election fraud that may have occurred any place in this great country. Mine is much smaller. A big investigation, but much smaller. I am only looking into election interference in the state of Georgia, and more specifically, things that they asked for around that call that occurred in my county, Fulton County.
Let me give you the jurisdictional standard here. Donald Trump was in DC. He makes a phone call to the then and current Secretary of State. The Secretary of State, by constitutional dynamic of the state of Georgia, also operates as the chief elections officer. He calls the chief elections officer. That guy, Raffensperger, recorded the conversation. In the conversation, you heard Donald Trump clearly try to convince the chief elections officer to transform the outcome of the election. That is against the law in the state of Georgia. You have two different laws. One, if a civilian tries to do it, there's another law if a government official attempts to do so. You have a felony version, you have a misdemeanor version, all right? That sets your jurisdictional dynamic. The office of Raffensperger is in Atlanta. Atlanta is in Fulton County. Fani Willis is the DA of Fulton County. Everything in Fulton County comes under her jurisdictional control, even if there's an element of shared jurisdiction. Let's put up the tweet, Truth Social. Donald Trump calling the DA racist. He said, and I quote, "The racist district attorney in Atlanta, Fani T. Willis, one of the most dangerous and corrupt cities in the US, is now calling the Georgia legislature, of course, racist. Because they want to make it easier to remove and replace local rogue prosecutors who are incompetent, racist, or unable to properly do their job. This is a great development for Georgia, but also other parts of the country. Congratulations to the Georgia legislature for having the courage to act boldly, fairly, and fast." So he put this on Truth Social in record time, by the way. We all know Donald Trump doesn't read a damn thing, he's told. So someone told him this bill was about to pass. And then he engaged in a strategy after telling them what bill he would like to see. My conclusion. There's more. The New York Times reported that the Georgia Senate voted 32-24 to pass a bill sponsored by Senator Randy Robertson, Senate Bill 92. The bill would create an oversight committee with the power to remove elected district attorneys who have committed what they call willful misconduct in office. The GOP is also trying to pass a bill filed by State Representative Houston Gaines that would allow for the recall of a DA with only 2% of the vote, 2% of signatures. The amount of signatures currently needed is 30%. Let me explain what they're doing, okay? You're going to have, at the end of this, probably up to 5 different bills. These 5 different bills will have separate committee assignments and they will go along very separate tracks. Very difficult to trace all of them. And then on the last day of session, last day of legislative session in Georgia, they will combine these bills under an amendment rule. That amendment rule will allow all of these bills to merge together and pass under the guise of other legislation, making it difficult, once again, to understand all of the laws that are being passed. That's the reason you create multiple tracks for basically one law. It's trickery. They're very good at it. Now let's talk about how the 30% to 2% drop impacts pretty much every DA. Right now, if you want to recall a district attorney in Georgia, you must get 30% of signatures of those who are registered voters in the county. That's how it works. They want to lower that to 2%. Why? Because anyone with money can get any DA recalled at any time they choose. That's why. You know, it takes a whole lot of money to get 30%. It takes a little money to get 2. They want to make it easier for those with money, influence, power, control, corporate connections, etc., to eliminate a DA from office. There's more. Willis is soon expected to announce whether she will indict Trump for voter fraud. And she called the GOP maneuver to pass the 2 bills prior to her announcement racist. She also noted that the majority of people in Georgia live within the jurisdictions of 14 minority prosecutors. That is true. For the hundreds of years we've had prosecutors, this has been unnecessary, said Willis, whose district includes most of Georgia's capital, which is Atlanta. But now, all of a sudden, this is a priority and it is racist. Now, remember, where did this legislation come from? Did it come from some overwhelming concern from members of the community? No. Did it come from a ground movement, a grassroots movement in order to somehow grant more power to the state? No. It's actually antithetical to the Republican Party's platform. Less government overreach, more local control. They are literally going against their own design based on their platform directive. In order to do what? In order to limit the power of Fani Willis. But it's not just Fani Willis. You see, Republicans are very good at creating, as I have said, the boogeyman. In this case, the boogie woman, in order to get massive legislation passed that will impact everyone. For the DAs who hear this throughout the state of Georgia, let me remind you, this law does not simply apply to Fulton, it applies to you. If you allow the state to do this without pushing back, without utilizing your influence, power, lobbyists, etc., please understand, you think they're knocking on your neighbor's door, but you're next. There's more. Let's put them up. Georgia Senator Bill Cowsert on the left also called out Willis, saying, for you to come in here and try to make this about racism, that this bill is directed at any DA or solicitor because racism is absurd and it's offensive and it's a racist statement on its own. Wait a minute. He said, you're wrong for calling this racist, and your comment is actually racist. But the first person to use the word was actually Donald Trump. So all of you all are saying racist. There's more. Willis also was told by Republican Brian Strickland that she was being emotional. So that's the young fella. I actually know Strickland, had high hopes for him as he came into the legislature some years back as more of a moderate. He's now obviously drinking the Kool-Aid. I should have checked on him earlier. Willis began investigating the former president, Donald Trump, after what? His actions. A phone call was recorded of him telling the Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, and his attorney to find him more votes. So look, all I want to do is this, he says. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have because we won the state, said Trump, in the weeks after the 2020 election. So what we are going to do here, folks, I only need 11,000 votes. Fellas, I need 11,000 votes. Give me a break. Willis said further on the GOP bills to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and I quote, "It's targeting me and maybe people with similar ideologies and wanted to replace it for ideologies that don't represent the majority of the state's population. It seems to me that what they're really saying is that there should be local control until we don't like who the locals choose." Exactly. It's happening in Jackson, Mississippi. It's happening in Atlanta by way of what's called the Buckhead movement. It happened in Stockbridge, Georgia. It is happening right here in Fulton, and it will likely happen in your jurisdiction as well. Now, let's talk about the Democratic response. Utter BS. You see, Republicans give their people laws. We give our people speeches, press conferences, an email blast. At some point, Democrats have to be okay with power. They beg for it every election cycle. Vote for me and I'll set you free. We can do this together, hope, change, etc. And then you get all the chips beyond what was probable. The state of Georgia gave you Senator Jon Ossoff. The state of Georgia gave you Senator Warnock because you said that's what you needed to change things, but you didn't. The reason why people on the right are still excited about their leaders is because the game and the language of politics is actual policy and law. They're talking the language congruent to the position. You're not elected to give speeches. It's good if you can. You're not even elected to give me or anyone else some kind of moral directive. It's good if you are able to. You are elected to make laws. You are a lawmaker. All right, Sharon, thoughts here.
Well, Dr. Richey, I'm glad that you gave us the history of this one, the full origin, because I was hoping, I say sarcastically, that perhaps we could have called this the Ahmaud Arbery bill. Remember Jackie Johnson, the disgraced DA?
Yep,
Is she's still getting special treatment, by the way? Has she been arraigned yet? I get it. The law doesn't apply to me when you are a powerful 1%er, a white male. And if it does, I'll just change the law. It's that simple, right? Is that the good summary, or am I making it too simple?
That's exactly what's happening. And once again, not the sentiment of the community, not the sentiment of the majority of citizens in any state. Mississippi didn't want what happened to them. Jackson didn't want it. Atlanta doesn't want it. Most voters in Georgia, they do not want this. Republicans do not care. All right, we will follow it as it continues to develop. This legislation is happening now in Georgia. And if it passes all chambers, it will be signed into law, I believe.